If there's one thing I can be sure about with this YouTube channel, it's that after I post a video doing something fine woodworking based, I will inevitably receive comments asking about my sharpening routine. Sharpening embodies all the best virtues of being a great craftsperson: patience, discipline, and faith in ritual. All should not be underestimated as the hardest part of sharpening, because really, the easiest part is the actual practice, and the hardest is stopping an exciting project in the middle to go back to the grindstone, or whetstone, or diamond stone. I've found over the years my routine has got simpler and simpler, and I'm finding that following a few fundamental rules can be better than all the fancy whetstones in the world. I'm sharpening all the chisels in my new treehouse at the moment in prep for a new guitar, so I thought I'd bring you along for the ride. So let's go back to basics so we can understand exactly what is happening when a chisel is being sharpened. Now, I like to think of a chisel blade as a tiny, precise wedge, because that's exactly what it is. The cutting edge is formed by two angled surfaces meeting at a point, and to keep it slicing cleanly, we need to sharpen those two key bevels. A bevel is another word for an edge, by the way. First, there's the primary bevel, usually set at around 25 degrees. This is the foundation edge. It's the bulk of the metal which gives your chisel its overall shape and strength. And it's what we usually use a grinding wheel to establish. You'll also probably buy the chisel from the shop with this on it already at whatever angle the manufacturer chooses. Now, luckily you don't actually have to touch this one very often. Regrinding this bevel takes a long time, it's pretty laborious, and unless you're constantly hacking through hardwoods or accidentally chiseling into nails, we've all been there, you may only need to regrind once every few months. But what we're going to be doing today is talking about that secondary bevel. Now, when we work on the secondary bevel, it's called honing. So you might say grinding and honing together is the process of sharpening, but technically the final sharpen is the honing process, just to make it unnecessarily complicated. If it helps to think of it another way, honing is kind of like when you replace the tread on your tires instead of rebuilding the entire wheel. So the secondary bevel is our actual cutting edge, and it's the part that you hone regularly. This secondary bevel is only a fraction of a millimeter wide, so honing it is quick and easy compared to shaping the whole primary bevel. Having this secondary bevel means that every time your chisel starts to feel a little bit dull, a quick rehone brings it back to life without wearing down too much metal. When the micro bevel gets large enough that it's taking a while to hone all of the steel down, that's when you know that it's time to regrind. If you're spending more time grinding than honing, then something is definitely going wrong. Could be your technique, or your chisel has been moonlighting as a screwdriver. Now, what's actually happening as we hone is that we're pushing metal forward, gradually thinning it until it curls over the edge into something called a burr. The burr is a microscopic wire of fatigued metal that clings to the tip of your chisel, and it's a telltale sign that you sharpened right to the edge. So we always want to see a burr at some point during our sharpening process, our rehoning process, but the most important thing to note is that seeing a burr does not mean that it is time to stop. A burr is not sharpness. In fact, it's actually very fragile and jagged. If you don't remove it properly, your chisel will not cut cleanly. The way that we deal with this burr is everything when it comes to the fight for a sharp blade, so the key is being as gentle and careful as possible with the tip of your blade, and alternating your honing strokes, finishing with a soft material that won't ruin the hard work. A strop, usually made of leather, with a squeeze of super high grit metal compound. When the burr appears, it means that the blade is extra fragile, so treat it like a little baby you don't accidentally want to knock. Now, when you sharpen on one side, you push the burr over to the other side. When you flip the chisel during the sharpening process, you push it back. After a few passes, the metal weakens and it snaps off, leaving behind a crisp, clean edge that crucially isn't shiny, but rather has a sort of matte sheen to it. If you see a shiny bit at the end, that is usually a bit of leftover burr. Now, I find the biggest mistake that beginners make, including myself back in the day, was rushing this last burr-related step. If you don't fully remove the burr, it can fold over the edge the first time you use the chisel, instantly dulling your hard work. If there is a rugged wire of metal left behind, it is not going to cut through wood, it is going to tear it. So take your time, feel for the burr, look for the burr, remove it properly. When you get it right, your chisel will glide through wood like a hot knife through butter. Now, that is literally all there is to it, and I do believe that practice is better than theory, so now you know what's going on, hopefully. Let's go over to the stone. Guys, we've got a spanner in the works in the form of a kookaburra. Cookie has other ideas. apparently for the tripod right now, so I think he was reminding me that I need to talk about today's sponsor for this video, so let's jump in with them. Now, since I've been forced to go back to the literal drawing board with this treehouse workshop, I have been watching a bunch of woodworking videos online to remind myself how to do my job. And that go-to platform is Woodworkers Guild of America. My favourite evening is to cozy up in my treehouse and watch these videos, and for this video I watched their one on sharpening. Woodworkers Guild of America is your online resource for woodworking instructions, ideas and information. As I say, I was brushing up on my sharpening knowledge for today's video, trying to figure out the best way to explain it to you guys. They've got a whole bunch of videos on sharpening, so I'd highly recommend, if you don't get what I'm saying, to go check them out. But I'm also looking at storage videos. They've got some great videos on like how to maximize space in your workshop and how to build the appropriate storage for your tools and that kind of thing, so do check that out as well if you're in a similar boat to me and you've just moved workshop. There's also a really helpful area where you can connect with your fellow members and chat shop in general and just be nerds like we all love to do. The teachers are fantastic on there. I really love their style, and each one has their own little individual take on stuff, which is great because you don't want this woodworking game to be a vacuum. I think it's always really important to check out different things and get your own way of doing stuff from the knowledge that you take in. Woodworkers Guild of America are kind enough to have sponsored this video, and as a little treat they have offered the first 1,000 people who click the link in my bio to receive a full year of premium membership for only $1.49. This is valid for new members only, but my goodness, what a deal! Cheaper than your morning coffee, and it comes with much more longevity, I would argue. Thanks Woodworkers Guild of America for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to it. I'm going to be using only one stone to keep this quick and realistic today, so I want to show you the kind of result you can get with a 1200 gritter plus a leather strop, which is currently my tool roll because I left my real strop and buffing compound behind in London. Proper cowboy sharpening today, folks. But if anything, it hammers home that technique is everything. Now, I use a diamond stone because I learned on a diamond stone and you don't need to constantly flatten it. I've had this particular one for about 7 or 8 years now, and honestly it's still going strong. Plus, all I need to do to prep for the sharpen is just to spritz a bit of water on it. But if you are using a wet stone, remember to soak it appropriately before you begin this process. Now, I'll also be using a honing guide. Now, before anyone bites my head off in the comments, I do stand by my opinion that this is one of the best tools I own. It removes human error when you're sharpening, because sometimes if you're freehanding it, something can distract you, or for example, a kookaburra can land on your balcony and give you a fright, and you have to spend forever correcting the wonky bevel. Don't ask me how I know that. So to begin, just keep in mind that mentality. The edge is now like a little baby. You don't want to be lax with it and accidentally knock it. We're going to start by flattening the back of this chisel, which will act as one side of that wedge that I talked about earlier. Start by resting the edge of your chisel on the stone and use 2 fingers to guide the blade gently onto the surface of that stone. Now, to maximise surface area of the stone and to achieve a flat back as quickly and evenly as possible, I always sharpen in this figure of 8 motion. Now, don't worry if you're slow at first, it's always form over speed when it comes to sharpening, so just remember that. You could also use a bit of Sharpie to mark the back of your chisel so you can actively see what you're removing. When all the Sharpie's gone, chances are, if your technique is good, that chisel would have a perfectly flat back. Use any means to check this. Possible, a square is a good option, just like you would with timber. Just a side note if you're confused, my chisels here are actually Japanese style, and perhaps the biggest difference from a Western style chisel is this hollow bevel on the back here, which aids this very process, right? So flattening the back. That's because you cut out the literal middleman in terms of steel, and you're just focusing on the tip and the edges to keep it square. While Western chisels don't have this, it doesn't affect this tutorial if you do have one, and it might just take a little bit longer to get that back perfectly flat, but that's it. You're just shaping more metal. So when the back is perfectly flat, it's time to grab your honing guide, or if you're freehanding it, get into position on your stone of choice. As discussed earlier in the video, this is your time to hone that secondary bevel to 30 degrees. Each honing guide is different, so I'm not going to walk you through how I'm doing this, but this is the Veritas one if anyone wanted to know. Now, another reason I love the honing guide is because I can go really, really fast back and forth with that motion and not worry about any weird shaped bevels or leaning to one side, all that kind of stuff. I can just go back and forth really easily, it's no dramas. And now I'm just going to check it. And if you've got a cloth handy, now's the time to use it. Just check the progress of that. Your light source is your best friend during this process, and you just want to keep a quick eye on that. There you go. Now I find the key is to keep checking the end, and when I catch sight of that burr, I will begin that flipping process back to that original flat side for a couple of times here. When the burr is starting to look a little less intense, that's when I move to the strop. So I think we're there now because there wasn't much work to do on this chisel, so we're going to move over to that now. Again, I would usually use a bit of buffing compound, but we don't have that option today, so we're just going to flip the blade, keeping it in the honing guide, back and forth, being super mindful of how fragile this blade is. This is why I think woodwork is such a feminine craft, because it really does require a very gentle touch to get great results, and if your tools are sharp like this, you shouldn't really need to put any force into any aspect of your woodworking at all. Anyway, now when I think it's looking pretty good, I will go back to the classic technique, which I mentioned before, of testing whether a blade is sharp, which is of course the arm hair technique. So let's see how we did. Oh, we're looking good there. Oh, that's looking real good. That is shaving the hairs away with no dramas at all. We'll of course need to allow for arm hair regrowth times if you're sharpening a lot, so do make use of that leg hair or even beard hair if you're blessed with the hormones. But always be extra careful, guys. Make sure you're safe when performing this process. It goes without saying, blades and skin do not mix, famously. That's it. That's how I go about getting my tools sharp. It's not that complicated. It just relies on technique and being super gentle with that key burr that I've talked so much about today. Now, if you have any extra advice, please do drop it in the comments, because we could all benefit from that. I think it's really cool that we have this community. I did the really fun piece of maths to figure out how many years of shared experience we actually have as a community on this channel. And after a little peek at my YouTube analytics, I figured out the average age of this audience and then put it against the number of subscribers I currently have, which at this time is 112,558, meaning that our combined years of experience here on this channel is actually an absurd 5,725,188.72 years. I think I got that right. That is older than human civilization and roughly the same age as some of the world's oldest trees, so that's pretty cool. With this in mind, do leave a comment, share your favourite sharpening tips, or of course any other woodworking tips you feel possessed to share. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon. I've just had a couple of quite good friends of mine land on a tree next to me, and I really hope they're going to come down and introduce themselves, because since they started showing up, I've really hoped that I'll be filming one time when they visit, and it looks like today's the day.